to Laptop Dojo, where the strikes come from the fist, not from copyright bots. I'm Shifu Pain, and we've talked before about the Dao Sword and briefly discussed its history while also talking about its main benefits. And in that video, I mentioned how there was another form of sword that was primarily used, which is what we're talking about today, as we take a look at the Jian sword.
The Jian, also called the long sword or the Dai Chi Jian, dating the first use of the Jian is tricky, but the first written mention of the sword comes to us from the 7th century BCE, during the Spring and Autumn period.
So as we've discussed, over time, the Jian sword, over time, began to be outgrown as the Dao sword gained popularity. And the main reasons why that happened was that the Dao sword is far better for slashing and cutting and generally wide-sweeping attacks, which makes it far better from a higher ground, such as when you're on horseback. Whereas the Jian sword, its main characteristics are that whereas the Dao sword has a single edge to it, the Jian has two edges to it on either side. And overall, it's more of a piercing weapon. Well, that was one of the reasons why it was outgrown over time. Another reason was, as I discovered during my research process, apparently the Jian sword was found to be far more difficult to unsheath from its scabbard or from its holder, as was discovered when the first emperor of China was in the middle of an assassination attempt.
So over time, the Jian was phased out. But if that happened, why do we still practice it? Well, the Jian survived as decoration for the higher classes to wear and adorn, as well as a prop in sword dances. It also became one of the most highly regarded weapons in Chinese martial arts, along with the spear, the staff, and the Dao sword.
But enough talk, let's get to the action and take a look at the form for the Jian sword.
So as ever, we begin in attention, feet shoulder width apart, and for this form of attention, we're going to hold the sword in our non-dominant hand, so that the blade is inside the body. And we're going to bring our arms up to chest level. Step out to forward bow stance, pointing forwards with the dominant hand, pointing with the index and middle fingers, and have the other arm pointing behind us. Then we're going to arch the arm with the sword clutched around and turn pointing forwards, and bring our non-dominant arm up to chest level. We're then going to turn 180 degrees into forward bow and point forwards, turning 180 degrees again and going into sitting cat stance. We're going to bring our hands together up to the level of our shoulder and switch our sword into our dominant hand. Now we're going to go into forward bow stance and stab forwards, then step forwards, still in forward bow stance and stab to the opposite side. Step forwards into forward bow stance again and stab to the first side. From here we're going to bring ourselves up, step our dominant leg behind our non-dominant, creating a cross, and stab downwards on our dominant side. Then we're going to descend into the turn stance and point upwards with the Jian, having our non-dominant hand rest above the head for balance. Then we're going to rise and step into forward bow and stab forwards. From here we're going to transition to cat stance and arch our sword around the non-dominant side of the body, and then arch the sword around the dominant side of the body. From here drop into turn stance and point our sword upwards. Rising once more, we're going to go into crane stance, stabbing downwards and having our other arm raised to maintain balance. From there we're going to turn and step forwards with our feet close together and knees bent. From there, step forwards into forward bow, pointing forwards with our non-dominant hand and raise our sword, pointing it skyward. From there, transition to turn stance and point the blade upwards. Moving on, we're going to motion into cat stance and bring the sword up to pointing forwards, and then arch the sword around to the other side, resting it again at eye level and remaining in cat stance. Next, we're going to remain planted on our dominant leg, arching our body forwards and bringing our non-dominant leg up to keep balance. We're going to point our sword upwards and extend our other arm to also keep balance. From there, we're going to transition down into a low reverse bow stance and bring the sword into the body, keeping it parallel with our extended front leg. Rising then to forward bow stance and stab forwards, finishing then in reverse bow stance, bringing the sword into the body, parallel with the front leg, and finish in attention.
And now I'll repeat the form for you again at full speed. Keep in mind that this form is more aesthetic than it is practical, as the Jian sword was something that was phased out in terms of warfare and is more used in dance and for tradition. Next time we're going to be taking a look at another weapon of great infamy as we take a look at the nunchucks. But with that, thank you all for watching, and until next time, peace be with you.